Well, g'day folks. Welcome to another episode of Learn to Paint TV. Rod Moore here with you from the Learn to Paint Academy, and excited about this week's episode. This week we're going to do a beautiful panoramic landscape view from down the Tweed River region in northern New South Wales, on the border of Queensland. And there's a old volcanic mountain there called Mount Warning. Took some photos, so that's the painting we're going to do today. You've got the mountain in the background there. You've got this sort of tree line through here, this nice grass field in the foreground, and the dam and strong shadows in the foreground there. So it's going to make a nice little painting. We'll pop in a little house or two in there as well, just to keep it interesting. Now, as always, with the way we approach painting here at Learn to Paint TV, is we're going to use the Moore method of painting, which is an easy process. It's all based around three colours, 3 brushes, and 3 simple steps. Let's get underway with step 1. I'm just going to hold the photo here now. Always in the drawing phase, use a little bit of water, but I don't use much water with acrylics once we get past the drawing phase. I don't think you necessarily need to. I know a lot of people do with acrylics. And all we want to do is just mix up a little puddle of paint there, just so we've got a little bit of paint just to draw with. Now, this painting, the mountain range sort of sits up above that sort of 1/3 mark. So I'll just put a little bit of an indicator in there. That's that line that runs right through there, okay? And it sort of separates this middle distance from the background area there. And from there, what I want to do is just place in Mount Warning. And I don't want it to be hard up against the edge here. I want it to be sort of around about there as a sort of a focal point in the distance. And it's important we get the shape of this one right. We can probably get the other mountains not as accurate if you wanted. However, Mount Warning being a fairly popular landmark, people are going to recognise whether we've got that basic shape right or not. And that one only wants to run to about there. It's going to run through there. It's another little peak through there. Okay, so it's a little mountain range like so. And then intersecting that is going to be a hillside that runs down that way. And then it runs back that way. And then there's a little bit of detail in here. Getting all this tree area here right, there's a fair bit in that. Now what you want to do is simplify it right down and say, okay, are there some big shapes in there that I can work with? And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take this row of trees through here, and I'm just going to treat that all as one big shape in there. Okay, so that way we'll simplify it right down and make our life a little bit easier. So that row of trees is going to sit around about there. It's just going to dips down a little bit there, and it's going to go to about there. On the side here we've got a taller group of trees that fall into shadow there, and then the foreground trees sit in here, and these all fall into shadow as well. So I'm just going to make an indication of where they are going to be. It's going to be somewhere like that, and that's all in shadow. Okay. From there, there's a few sort of distinguishing lines in the field, so I'll pop a couple of those in, and then we've got this dam area that's sitting in there. That's around about all I think we'll do with this. Okay, so there's a lot of information on the board there, on the canvas, and this is a 16 by 20 inch canvas. But really what we've got is a background row of mountains. Getting that outline of the shape is important. Then we've got this middle distance row of trees in through there. Okay, so it's 2 shapes. That one, let's include that with the mountains. So it's 2 shapes we're working with. We've got another clump of trees here, 3 shapes, 4 shapes there with the shadow, and then a couple of directional lines, you know, and a little dam there. So maybe 5 shapes all up. That's step 1 of the Moore method. Now, I haven't done an accurate drawing, but what I know is I've placed our big shapes in the right spot, because what's going to happen is the eye is going to come in and there's this big dark mass here with highlight. It's going to lead the eye around here to the dam and then up these directional lines, and it's going to work its way through into the mount warning area. That's sort of the path that we want to lead the eye through in the painting. Okay, let's start on step 2 now. I've just taken a medium-sized flat brush with bristle hair, and I've put up here, we've got more ultramarine blue, permanent alizarin, and the yellow ochre. And we're going to start in the distance, and we're going to progressively get darker as we come forward to establish our values pattern. Okay, so I know that this row of mountains in the background is going to be a bluey grey. So I need blue and white in there. And then to grey it, we're going to put in a little bit of the red, and we're going to put in a little bit of the yellow, okay? Because the combination of the red and yellow will grey back that blue. Let's mix that around. And that looks pretty good. First up, let's just test, okay? I think that's pretty accurate, or it's accurate enough for the moment, and let's just work our way in, maintain the shape of these mountains here. Okay. So just blocking in that colour. Now we want to get to this middle distant row of trees, and again we need to darken up a little bit now. We need to not have as we need to have a value shift there, which is going to help us see the depth in the painting. Okay, so a little bit more white in there, and you'll see when I put that up that that's darker than the background mountains. So let me just run a little line of trees in there. Now at this point I may deviate from the actual photo. If there's things that I see that would improve it, like just bringing it up in the corner there with some trees, then I'll do that. You know, I'm not going to be a slave to the photo, which I think is an important thing to learn if you paint a lot from photos, not to let them dictate what makes a good painting. Okay, now that's a little bit too red. So we go a little bit more blue. I'm just going to grey it back a little bit with just a touch of the yellow. Okay, a little bit bluer. Okay, that's more like what we want. Now if I put that there, you can see that again, that's another jump in value. It's darker than what we've just put down. So don't fuss about how you apply this paint. You can see I'm just sort of scrubbing it in, and I'm using plenty of paint. I think that's an important thing for you to be aware of, that you want to use plenty of paint. Don't be stingy with your paint. And now if I layer that by just clipping it over the background trees, then that'll give us layering effect and help us create that area of perspective. So you can see there's now, this is now my darkest dark. That was the previous mix. That was the mix before that. And let's just now put that there, okay, against what we've just done. And automatically you can see straight away that that is our darkest dark, right? Make that shadow through there. So I always overpaint my shadows and then I work back into them with my ground colours, you know, so the grasses and things. The next thing we've got here is we've got fields of grass. Now, I could go and paint that in green now, but what I've found is that you're always better to put an earthy tone down first and then put your greens over the top of that earthy tone. And it seems to, because red, orangey red is the complement of greens. So by putting that earthy tone, it vibrates through the greens and it just gives the whole painting a little bit more life and a little bit more buzz. So that's what we're going to do. I'm going to start off with our darkest mix of orange in here, and then because this is off in the distance, we need to progressively lighten that and grey it off as we go. So for that I'll use another medium brush. Okay, I'll take all of that red there, and we'll take a big chunk of the yellow, and we'll just get a nice sort of mid-tone mix there of an orange. Okay, a little bit more yellow perhaps. Okay, now I've got lots and lots of paint up there. I've got a big area to cover, so let's just work that in. Just scrub that in. No need to fuss because this is the underpainting. This is just getting some paint down, getting the right values in play, and so on. So don't fuss too much with this. All I want to really do is just cover the canvas. Now I've had people say to me, well, why don't you just tone the canvas with that reddy orange? Well, the reason is, you could do that of course, but the reason is because we want to create a gradient. We don't want this colour in the back there because it's too far away in depth. So if I just put a tone on or a wash on the whole canvas, we wouldn't get that gradient effect, and so we'd miss out on some of the key elements of creating area perspective, right? That's not to say that having a base tone down on your canvas isn't a good idea, because painting against white is not always perfect, okay? But just keep in mind the gradient factor. See, now I'm adding white here, and what we need to do is start creating depth in here. I don't want to lose that my down there, so I'll leave a little spot for that. So we're going to start progressively adding in more white and just toning that back. And we'll do the same with the green that we put over the top of it. Just integrate it there, connect it in. So you can see we've got our strongest, warmest tones in the front. We've got our paler, greyer tone at the back. It's the same family of colours because we used only a couple of colours. We're just using 3, at this stage. And it all works, it all harmonises together. It's the same colours that are in here that are in the background. And then because of the simplicity of just using a few colours, we tie everything together and get colour harmony. I think that pretty much finishes step 2 of the Moore method of painting. You can see there's definite progression and depth building up in the painting, and when we start to add on our details and our highlights and our finishing touches, this is going to come up quite nice. Okay, welcome back folks. We're now going to do step 3 of the Moore method of painting, which is doing our highlights, details, finishing touches. So this is going along quite nicely. So what we want to do is start off with this distant row of trees here and start to put some highlight colour onto those. And the best way I've found to find the highlight colour is to get back to the original shadow tone. So we go with our our ultramarine blue, the permanent alizarin, and the white. And we just find that tone again. Okay, and we just want to be slightly lighter because this is obviously dried a little touch darker. So we just mix it to be just a touch lighter, which is around about there. I'm doing a little test there to see if that's working. Okay, and then what we want to do is just lighten that off a little more, because that's lighter at the moment. It's going to dry roughly the same tone. And then we just want to warm it up a little bit with, it's going to use a little bit of yellow ochre into that mix. Okay, so it's going to be a slightly lighter and slightly warmer tone. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to introduce that. Sunlight's coming in from this direction, so I'm just going to with a little bit of paint on the brush, not too much. Okay. Like so. I'm just creating little shapes here of the tops of the trees where the sunlight will be catching on. But don't do it everywhere. See, I'm preserving lots of that dark in there as well. Now we don't need too much variation in this distant area because we don't want this to really be coming forward and taking too much attention in the painting. It's really just to sit there in the background. And then we just keep coming forward until we have each of our groups of trees highlighted. So that's probably a bit better. That's more closer to the darker tone there. I'll just strengthen up a couple of these in the background here as well while I'm at it. Paint went on a little bit light there. Okay. So, same philosophy applies. We're going to add more white and more yellow into that. So we're going to lighten it and then we're going to warm it up. Okay, but we're just got to be careful it doesn't get a little bit too murky. So sometimes I'll add a bit more blue into it and a bit more of the yellow ochre just to push it slightly green. Because you can see in the background there it's more on the yellowy sort of side, whereas now what I've got is a slightly green version of it. And a touch more yellow ochre in there. Okay. Now I don't want too much paint, so I'll just pull a little bit off there and then I can start working on this tree here. So the sunlight will be catching all the top there. So that brings us now to this row of trees here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop more blue in there and more yellow. Okay, we'll get a mid-tone, something like that. And just having a look at our reference photo. Okay, so we start off by establishing in our mid-tones here. And then again we'll add that cadmium yellow light in just for a bit more punch in there. And look, this is a really easy way of creating trees that have got depth and dimension in them. Okay, now we haven't finished with them obviously, we're just putting in a few little touches of colour, which when you look at a tree from a distance, that's kind of what you see, is the shadow and light patterns. You don't see leaves and branches from a bit of a distance off, okay? Something like that. Now I've got too much paint on the brush because I'm mixing it with the brush, so I'll stop and just pull some of that out. Pick up some of that purpley tone in there just to mute it back, and then let me just work that in there. I'm just very light touch with the brush. Just dragging it across that canvas and allowing the tooth of the canvas really to pull the paint off rather than me putting too much pressure. As you can see, we've sort of created a little bit of separation there. And just before we do that, I'll just take that tone there and I'll just lighten that back into there. Take some of that. Just getting a little bit of a tone that is going to, actually needs a lot more blue in there. Something like that. And that is going to sit. There's just this little hillside in the back here. It gets yellower in through here, so when we come into this section in through here, we're going to run this sort of warm yellowier tone in. We can utilise this shadow here and we can just put in here a few touches of, well, that's probably a bit too bright. I'll just dull that back a bit. We can create some tree trunk sort of effects in there, which you'll see when I add those trees in. And that's part of why the Moore method has been so successful in helping students around the world. I just got an email today from somebody who was thanking me for showing him how to paint because he never thought he could. And he's now became one of our life members as a result of, being so happy about having learnt to paint. I'm going to run some fence posts down along there, like so, and then we might run some just slightly smaller and paler down this way here. So we'll run them down along there. So it could be a little barn, but if I add a little touch of smoke, actually, I could make that probably a little bit wider. Let's just... I just don't want it to jump out too much, but because I put that blue down, it won't be too bright. A little bit of smoke coming out of there. Gives you a nice sense of depth. The eye sort of runs down in through here, into the valley, then up through there to Mount Warning. And I think it's come up reasonably well. It's a very basic approach. It's a simplistic little landscape painting. I've done it in a way that beginners to intermediate can have a go at it and have fun. If you're a more advanced painter, then you might want to take a lot more time and care and more detail. But as you can see, I've just been building up a little bit of detail, and just a little bit of information sometimes is all that's needed to convey the message and get the story across. So, for instance, I could put just a little touch of highlight on the back of some of these dots. Some people are going to think, oh, they're sheep or cows or whatever. Just that little touch of the smoke there tells us that this shape here is a little farmhouse, right? Even though what I've actually put up there is a little bit like a blob, right? It's just a blob of paint. And so it's sometimes about enough details just to get the mind making up its own interpretation of what's going on. That's all it needs sometimes. And I think we've pretty well achieved that and done it in a way that if you're just starting out painting, you could follow these instructions and end up with a great little landscape painting. And as we progress and teach you more, you can do more advanced landscape painting as well. So it's been a bit of fun. Mount Warning down near Tweed River, northern part of New South Wales. Have a go at this one. I think you'll enjoy it. And I hope you've enjoyed it as much as what I have. See you next week on Learn to Paint TV. Make sure you drop by and see all the episodes of Learn to Paint TV on www.learntopaint.tv. And if you want a free course that we give away at the Learn to Paint Academy, drop by there, learntopaint.academy, register for the free course, and I'll go into a lot more detail the concepts and ideas that we've talked about here today, and I think you'll enjoy that one as well. So check those out, and then I'll see you next week on Learn to Paint TV. Cheers for now.